Have you ever asked yourself, why did they leave? What did I do wrong? We sit there, rewinding moments, searching for the moment it all changed. But sometimes, the most powerful answers come in silence. The truth is, they didn't leave to hurt you, they left to reveal something within you. You see, when someone walks away from your life, it's not always about abandonment. Sometimes it's alignment. The universe removes what no longer serves your growth, and while it may feel like loss, it's actually redirection. Because pain isn't always punishment, it's preparation. Preparation for a stronger you, a wiser you, a more grounded you. You weren't meant to stay small in someone else's shadow. You were meant to rise. We often think of people leaving as a rejection, like we weren't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, lovable enough. That mindset becomes a loop. We replay moments trying to figure out what we could have done differently, as if changing our past could somehow bring them back. But here's the truth we rarely tell ourselves. Sometimes their exit wasn't a punishment. It was protection. It wasn't rejection. It was redirection. It was alignment. You see, not everyone in your life is meant to walk with you forever. Some people are seasonal teachers. They come into your life to mirror something you need to face, learn, or awaken to. And once that lesson is complete, their chapter closes. But because we're human, and we crave connection, we confuse closeness with permanence. And when it ends, we call it failure. But what if it wasn't failure at all? What if it was a sacred shift, a necessary turning point, a divine intervention pulling you toward your true path? Alignment means that something deeper is unfolding, something that you might not yet see but that your soul already knows. It's when life takes something away so that something better, truer, or more in sync with your evolution can take its place. That doesn't make the pain any less real. You're still allowed to grieve. You're allowed to miss them. You're allowed to cry and feel confused and angry and lost. But under the surface of that ache is clarity, waiting for you to see that this person's exit is carving space for something greater. Sometimes the universe removes people from our lives not because they were bad, but because their role in our journey had been fulfilled. You might have outgrown them, or maybe they outgrew the version of you that no longer exists. Maybe they were part of your survival, not your expansion. And while we hold on to them out of nostalgia, comfort, or fear of being alone, life is constantly nudging us forward. It's saying, you don't belong there anymore. When you realign, you're no longer chasing people who don't see your value. You're no longer shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that don't nurture your soul. You're no longer making excuses for behavior that breaks your spirit. You start walking differently, thinking differently, loving differently. And yes, you'll lose people along the way, but the people who are meant to walk with the version of you that's aligned, awakened, and authentic, they will meet you on that path. You don't have to beg for them. They'll find you in your truth. So no, they didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because your journey required something more aligned, something that speaks to your purpose, your peace, your power. And when you understand that, you no longer fear who leaves. You trust what's arriving. Pain is something we've been taught to avoid, escape, suppress, or numb. From a young age, we're conditioned to believe that pain is something negative, something to be ashamed of, something that signals failure. But the truth is, pain is not a punishment. It's preparation. It's life's most honest teacher, and it always arrives with a message. It doesn't show up to break you. It shows up to build you. But most of us don't see that until we've already been through the storm. When we're in pain, emotional, mental, or even physical, our first instinct is to ask, why me? We question our worth, our actions, our decisions. We think we're being punished, targeted, or abandoned by life itself. But what if we're looking at it the wrong way? What if pain is actually life's way of stretching us into the person we're becoming? What if it's shaping our capacity to love deeper, think clearer, live more purposefully? You don't grow in comfort. You don't evolve in ease. The muscles of your heart, your mind, your soul. They don't get stronger by being untouched. They grow when they're challenged. They grow when they're torn apart and rebuilt with new strength. That heartbreak that shattered you, it taught you boundaries. It revealed your emotional depth. That betrayal you never saw coming, it sharpened your intuition. That failure you thought would define you, it redefined your definition of success. The truth is, pain gives you what comfort never can: awareness. And awareness is the first step to awakening. We look back at painful moments and often wish they had never happened. But think about who you became because of them. Think about the courage you developed, the self-respect you discovered, the resilience you never knew you had. Pain carves away the layers that no longer serve us. It burns away our illusions, our attachments, our fears, so we can stand in something real, something grounded, something true. Pain is also a reminder that you care, that you loved deeply, that you tried, that you were alive in that moment. And if you feel broken now, that's not weakness. That's evidence of your depth, your empathy, your humanity. Most people numb their way through life. But you? You felt it all. And that means there's something powerful within you. Something that refuses to be numb. Something that's still reaching for growth, no matter how much it hurts. It's not about glorifying suffering. It's about recognizing that pain isn't the enemy, it's a messenger. It arrives to prepare you for something greater. It clears space for wisdom, for perspective, for strength. And while it may feel like everything is falling apart, sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen for everything real to come together. We spend so much of our lives chasing people, chasing approval, chasing titles, likes, love, success, validation. And often, we don't even realize we're doing it. It becomes second nature, running after things, hoping that once we get them, we'll feel whole. But the problem with chasing is that it keeps us focused on what's outside of us. It creates a gap between who we are and who we think we need to be in order to be enough. And the more we chase, the more we forget who we truly are. Chasing puts your worth in someone else's hands. It makes your peace dependent on someone else's response. It says, I'll feel good about myself when they choose me, when they recognize me, when I finally arrive. But growth doesn't happen when you're running after people or places that were never meant to hold your identity. Growth happens when you stop running and you start becoming. Becoming is the act of turning inward. It's asking yourself the questions we so often avoid. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I value? What does my soul actually want? Becoming isn't about performing or proving. It's about aligning. Aligning with your truth. Aligning with your values. Aligning with the kind of peace that isn't shaken by who walks in or out of your life. When you stop chasing, you stop begging for crumbs from people who were never capable of feeding your soul. You stop shrinking yourself just to be accepted in rooms where you were never meant to belong. You stop living in reaction and start living with intention. And that's where growth lives. In the stillness, in the reflection, in the honesty. Becoming means you start seeing your worth as something internal, not external. You stop measuring your value by how many followers you have or how quickly someone texts back. You start building a foundation that no one can take from you because it doesn't depend on anything temporary. The more you become, the less you need to prove. Because you're no longer living to be chosen, you're living as someone who already chose themselves. When you become instead of chase, your energy shifts. You attract different experiences. You begin to draw in the kind of people who see you, not the version of you that's curated or filtered, but the real you, the one that's done hiding, the one that's been waiting for you to come home. And yes, becoming is slower than chasing. It's quieter, but it's also deeper, more fulfilling, more sustainable. Chasing burns you out, becoming builds you up, and when you focus on becoming the kind of person you admire, you stop seeking that from others. Because you realize You already are becoming everything you were chasing in the first place. It's easy to believe that our value is tied to who chooses to stay in our lives. That if someone leaves, walks away, or forgets us, it somehow means we weren't enough, not lovable enough, not strong enough, not interesting or worthy or important enough. But that belief is rooted in a deep misunderstanding of where our true value comes from. Your worth was never meant to be measured by another person's presence or absence. People come and go for 1,000 different reasons, some of which have nothing to do with you at all. Sometimes, people leave not because you were lacking, but because they were lost. Sometimes they didn't have the capacity to hold space for your growth, your healing, your honesty, and yet, we blame ourselves. We replay conversations. We wonder what we could have done differently. But this idea that someone else's inability to stay says something about our worth, that's a lie we've been sold. The truth is, your value is inherent. It's not a performance. It's not a result of being chosen. It's not something someone else gets to give or take away. You were worthy the moment you were born, before any title, relationship, achievement, or mistake. Your value is not something you earn. It's something you remember. And the more you chase it through people, the more disconnected you become from your own center. You start to shape-shift. You start to people-please. You start to silence your voice just to keep others comfortable. But that isn't love. That's fear in disguise. That's self-abandonment dressed up as connection. When you internalize the idea that being left means being unworthy, you start living in a state of proving, trying to prove that you matter, that you're lovable, that you deserve to be seen. But what if you stopped trying to prove and started to simply be? What if your worth was something you lived from, not something you chased after? The people who truly see you, who value you for who you are, not for what you offer, not for how convenient you are, but for your essence, they don't need to be convinced to stay. They recognize your light because they've found theirs too. And those are the people who don't ask you to shrink. They don't ask you to dim. They sit with your truth, even when it's messy, even when it's loud, even when it's not easy. So when someone walks away, let them. When someone chooses not to stay, bless them and release them. Not because you're cold or unfeeling, but because you're clear. You're clear on this one unshakable truth. Your value was never on trial. It's not up for debate. It doesn't rise when you're praised or fall when you're ignored. It just is. And the moment you truly believe that, you stop clinging to those who don't. Because you no longer need someone to stay in order to believe that you're enough. When someone leaves your life, the first thing you often notice is the silence, the unanswered texts, the quiet mornings, the missing energy, and that silence feels heavy, unfamiliar. You start to fill it with questions. What happened? Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? That silence can feel like punishment. But what if it's actually an invitation? What if their absence isn't just an ending, but a beginning? A space that was never empty. It was just waiting for you to show up fully. Because sometimes, their absence is the only thing loud enough to call you back to your own presence. When we're wrapped up in someone else's energy, when we're constantly checking on their needs, adjusting to their moods, prioritizing their opinions, it's easy to forget our own. We silence parts of ourselves just to keep peace. We trade authenticity for attachment, and we don't even realize how much of ourselves we've dimmed until they're gone. It's only in their absence that we start to hear the voice we've been ignoring all along, our own. Their absence gives you the gift of reflection. It gives you time to sit with yourself, not as who you were trying to be for them, but as who you actually are. And maybe that version is quieter. Maybe it's more emotional, more sensitive, more thoughtful. Or maybe it's louder, more confident, more expressive. Either way, it's you, and you finally have the space to meet yourself without apology. Presence is more than just being physically alone. It's about being emotionally connected to your inner world. It's about asking yourself, what do I need today, instead of what do they need from me? It's about realizing that your peace isn't something that comes from another person. It's something you uncover when you stop outsourcing your happiness. When they were in your life, maybe they filled the silence. Maybe they distracted you from your own pain. Maybe they gave you comfort, yes, but also maybe they kept you from growing. And now, with them gone, you have an opening. Not just to heal, but to evolve. Not just to move on, but to move deeper. You might find parts of yourself that you didn't even know were missing. Passions you buried, dreams you delayed, truths you avoided. Their absence, as painful as it might feel, creates the stillness required for transformation. You finally have the room to listen to your intuition, your desires, your soul. Because the truth is, some people were never meant to stay forever. Their role was to awaken something in you, and once they've done that, their exit becomes a gift, if you choose to see it that way. It becomes the space where you stop chasing others and start discovering yourself. The space where you learn to stand in your own presence, fully grounded, fully aware, fully alive. You weren't meant to break from this. You were meant to build from it. So today, take the pain. Turn it into purpose. Take the lesson and turn it into love. Because the most beautiful chapters of your story start right after someone thinks they've ended it.